All the speakers are amazing, and I want you to hear them all. I also want you to experience everything that the All Seated Expo platform has and what Entire Productions, my core company, has up for you to do. So feel free to leave the stage. You can click that button in the middle that says leave stage, but come back to hear the speakers as well. I just don't want you to miss anything. So try to be everywhere at once. Our next speaker. Oh, okay. Here's the deal. There is a sleeping giant in every human. Brian's purpose in life is to awaken those giants within and turn them into legends by helping them grab what they believe is just out of their grasp. Brian is a heart surgeon without a blade. He does not start outside with what you need to do, he starts inside with who you are. In a world that is disconnected, Brian is revolutionizing how individuals, leaders, and entrepreneurs deeply connect with their authentic selves to achieve the best versions of themselves. Please welcome to this stage, Brian Bogert.
Thank you so much, Natasha, not only for that incredible intro, but for coordinating and putting together such an amazing event to support your work, Relentless. For those that are watching today, I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I like to teach through story, and so I'm going to start with one. I'm going to ask that everyone who's watching today close your eyes for just a minute. I want you to imagine that you've gone to a store, you've had a successful shopping trip, you breeze through the security line, walk out the doors, you look up and feel the sun and the warmth of it on your skin, you feel the breeze through your hair, you've got a pep in your step, and you're going on with your day. Then you get to your car, you're fumbling in your pockets to get your keys to unlock your door, and you turn your head and you see a truck barreling 40 miles an hour right at you with no time to react. Go ahead and open your eyes. That's where this portion of my story begins. My mom, my brother, and I went to our local Walmart to get a 1-inch paintbrush. It was August 10th, 1992, 115-degree day in Phoenix, Arizona. And as we got to our car to get home, anybody who's known me for more than about 2 minutes knows the energy and excitement I've always had for life. I was excited to get home and put that paintbrush to use. But this was back in the days before we had key fobs. And so I had to wait for my mom to literally catch up, stick her physical key in the door, turn it so we go on with our day. And as I was standing there, a truck pulled up in front of the store. Driver and middle passenger get out and leave the truck running. Passenger all the way to the right feels the truck moving backwards. So he did what any one of us would do, and he scooted over to put his foot on the brake, but he instead hit the gas. Combination of shock and force threw him up on the steering wheel, up on the dashboard, and before you know it, he's catapulting 40 miles an hour across the parking lot right at us with no time to react. Now, we were parked in an end spot. He goes up and over the median, up and over the tree in the median, hits our car, knocks me over, runs over me diagonally, tearing my spleen, leaving a tire track scar on my stomach, and continuing on to sever my left arm completely from my body. My mom and brother watched the whole thing happen. Luckily for me, so did my guardian angel. I'm forever indebted to this woman because there was a nurse that walked out of the store right when this took place, and she saw the literal life and limb scenario in front of her, and she chose to go into action versus go on with her day. She came over and she stopped the bleeding on the main wound and saved my life. And she instructed some innocent bystanders to run inside, grab a cooler, and fill it with ice so that my mom and brother, who now saw my arm laying 10 feet away from me in the parking lot, could pick it up and put it on ice to give me a fighting chance of having my limb reattached. So the reality of it is, if it wasn't for this woman, I either wouldn't be here with you today or I'd be here today with a cleaned up stump. That's just the reality. And I'm sure that many of you are not expecting it to go there today. I absolutely know that I have an extremely unique story. But what's also very important to acknowledge is that the more I've done this, the more I also realize that all of us have unique stories. What's important is that we pause and become aware of the lessons we can extract from our stories and then become intentional with how do we apply them in our lives. And we all have the ability to do that. And we also all have the ability to tap into the collective wisdom of other people's stories to shorten our own curve to learning. So I'm going to share with you two primary lessons. I'm going to unpack one of them today in quick order and allow you to understand where and how you can use this in your life. The first lesson is I learned not to get stuck by what has happened to me, but instead get moved by what I can do with it. And I'll tell you that the more we've done this, the more we recognize that moved people move people. So if you really want to be relentless in your life, if you want to be relentless in the lives of others, make sure that you are moved so that you can move others. The second lesson I didn't learn right away. You see, at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, I was a little bit in a fog. So although I was the one having surgeries done to me, although I was the one having to go through surgeries, I was also being guided through the process. My parents, however, were not in a fog. You see, they were intimately aware of the unceasing medical treatments, years of physical therapy, and the idea of seeing their son grow up without the use of his left arm was a source of great potential suffering. So they willed themselves day in and day out to do what was necessary, to do what was tough, to ultimately embrace the pains required to ultimately strengthen and heal me. So whether intentional or not, what they did was they ingrained in me a philosophy and a way of living, which by definition is relentless because it taught me to embrace pain to avoid suffering. And I believe that when we do that, that's also when we gain freedom. So it's these two lessons that we use to not only overcome this unique injury, but how my business partners and I scaled our last business to over 15 million within the span of a decade. And now how for the last few years, we flipped that on its head as a human behavior performance coach and individual to impact 1 billion lives as quickly as possible. Because we believe that if everybody can stand on their own 2 feet with the right level of awareness and the right level of intentionality so they can be their most authentic self, that's when they have the opportunity to have the door cracked to joy, freedom, and fulfillment. That's when magic can happen and we can have perspective, motivation, and direction in our lives. And that's when we can build a world where we can all stand on our own 2 feet, not just confident, but convicted in who we are, knowing that the world will not just accept us, but will embrace us for exactly who we are. So we're going to talk about how to embrace pain to avoid suffering and where and how you can apply this in your life holistically. First, we have to understand the concept, right? We talk about pain. And the world narrative is literally to reduce, eliminate, or avoid pain at all costs. Numb, avoid. And by the way, it makes sense because it's a natural evolutionary response to survival because 100 years ago, you get cut, you could die. But that's not the reality most of us live in anymore. So we have to redefine what does this look like? Pain's defined as short-term, intermittent, a direct cause from something and alleviated once that direct cause is removed. Then what do we do as human beings? We screw it up by putting adjectives in front of it, like acute and chronic. Now, acute fortunately maintains the definition, but chronic inherently changes it because it implies that pain is no longer short term and it persists after that direct cause is removed. So let's stop calling that pain chronic pain and start calling it what it actually is, suffering. Now, we don't want to admit that suffering exists, particularly when it's a direct result of our choices. And often suffering creeps up on us because it just adapts and we adapt to it sometimes until its effects are irreversible. But that's why pain gets so much attention because we feel it. It's real time and we want to avoid it. So how do we apply this concept? I'll give you an understanding of the basic element of it. We can embrace the pain of hitting the gym for 30 minutes a day to avoid the suffering of aches and pains of a sedentary lifestyle. We can embrace the pain of a difficult conversation with loved one or spouse to avoid the suffering of being stuck in a loveless marriage that's ultimately going to end in divorce, or being stuck in marriage when we actually want divorce. We can embrace the pain of the fit our kids are sure to throw by having them put down their mobile devices at the dinner table to avoid the suffering of years of lost meaningful connection and conversation we'll never get back. We as business owners, as leaders, can embrace the pain of firing our top salesperson who's contributing the most to top line growth to avoid the suffering of stagnant growth and losing all our other top talent because they were the greatest cancer in our culture. As individuals, we can embrace the pain of feeling the things that we need to feel in order to heal, to go see a therapist, to work with a guide who can help us understand ourselves more clearly so we can break the patterns of our past and avoid the suffering of remaining stuck in the same place forever. If you want to be relentless, if you want to go to the next level in your life, it's about understanding how to apply this concept holistically in your life. Because I believe that we all must choose our pain or our suffering will choose us. Now, I only have about 10 minutes and I'm coming up here to a quick wrap. But what I want to really point out is 2 things. One, we have to acknowledge the suffering we wish to avoid so that we understand what we're trying to actually avoid. I've got a client, he's 38 years old, moved 26 times by the time he was 18. He never lived in the same place twice, never had the same set of friends twice. He never learned how to give or receive love. Fast forward to today, he's got a wife and 2 beautiful girls. And when he can cast his vision of his life, he can see very clearly that at 80 years old, they're sitting on their farm and the only thing breaking the silence through the wind of the brush is the laughter of his kids and his grandkids. Now, when he takes that purpose and he burns it into his soul, it becomes powerful enough to overtake the pains required for him to change because suffering to him is a life without his girls. And he's today not living as the man, husband, and father that he could be because the emotional triggers, behavioral patterns, and environmental conditioning that have kept him stuck. So that leads us to our next point. We've got to identify the pains we tend to avoid and learn to embrace them. I'll use a personal story. See, I was run over by a truck. My left arm was torn off. I don't have a tricep. I don't have a lat on the left side of my back. But as the older I got, the more I started to develop pain that started to become debilitating in my world. So what did I do? I went and I joined the gym. and I started to work out. I went consistently for 30 days and then I stopped going. Now, had I not understood that the suffering I wished to avoid was the debilitating pain that was existing, that was limiting my ability to live the life I wanted, I might have stopped there. Or I would have done what everybody else does, and I would have focused on the strategy and tactics I could have replaced. So if that gym didn't work, maybe I could go join Orange Theory. Maybe I could join a cycle bar. Maybe I could go get a personal trainer. But the reality of it is, what I know is that strategy and tactics, although they're critically important to be relentless in our world, are not the things that keep us stuck. You see, it's a combination of the emotional triggers, behavioral patterns, and environmental conditioning that actually keep us stuck. So I had to ask myself an additional question. Is it the pain of working out I'm avoiding? Is it the pain of plyometrics, of lifting weight, of stretching, of the discomfort that's created there? Or is it the anxiety I get in a crowded gym that's connected to the fact that I realize I do everything different? It absolutely was the emotional trigger tied to my own shame. And so it allowed me to embrace the pains required to build out my own home gym so I could create my environment for success. Reality of it is we have to apply this as a habit in every area of our life. And what we know is that experts in habit formation even call it an upfront energy tax, which implies that there's an expense. All I'm trying to get you to encourage is to recognize that leaning into and understanding how to embrace pain is one of the greatest investments in you and one of the greatest investments in your future that will have the greatest compound effect in your life. Again, I believe we all must choose our pain or our suffering will choose us. And I'm very convinced that my parents, when they see my 6-year-old daughter run across the room and I get to pick her up with both hands and see her elicit that wild little laugh, that they no longer have regret. They understand that they got to embrace pain to allow them to avoid suffering. And I get to experience joy, freedom, and fulfillment through it. And I'm pretty sure they do too. And so can you. So thank you, Natasha, for the ability to be here today, to serve everyone here who's listening, and just give my story on how I've been able to be relentless, because it's my truth that gives others permission to live theirs. And think about how you can apply that in your life. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. That was amazing. I am so glad that I found you, that we found each other. And thank you for having me on your show yesterday with David Meltzer. You guys were funny.